Alright, so this is a new video. You know what? Why care about anything? Why not just voice my thoughts, I'm gonna talk about whatever I want, Just giving my perspective, not attacking or doing anything. Anyway, so what I gotta say is this. The question is rational? Right? Well, to begin, to be honest, I'm not convinced by any religion. There are so many religions, so many deities. I'm not truly convinced by any of them. Because they make some strong claims, And these claims, they need evidence. They need extraordinary claims, they need extraordinary evidence. For example, if you claim that God exists, or if you, with 100% certainty, heaven, hell, afterlife, all of these, they are metaphysical concepts, right? Which cannot be verified. But how can you know that's 100% the case? That's the problem. Not belief is certain belief. Not every belief is a certain belief, but, in the case of religious people, it is, So you gotta provide evidence for that, right? The reason why I think, back to the question, why I think atheism is rational, is because, to be specific agnosticism, because not atheism in the academic definition, believing that God doesn't exist, because that requires evidence. But instead, it's agnosticism, which is a lack of believing God. You don't know whether God exists or not. Okay, so why do I think it is rational? I think it is rational because you withhold belief in the absence of sufficient evidence, in the absence of undeniable strong evidence. You withhold belief, and I think it's a rational thing to do. Now, if we talk about the definition of rational, I think rational, some people would say, well, it's somewhat pertains to logic and reason. Yeah, that's an acceptable definition, but I would personally say that rational is in relation to decisions and beliefs. And it's something that is according to the evidence. So if there is no sufficient evidence, then it's rational to not, for example, believe in something. Logical inferences do not require explanations. If you believe that rationality requires reason, and reason requires explanatory power, then I could give you an example of a logical inference without explanation. Socrates is human, all humans are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal. Now this is a logical inference going from the premises to the conclusion, but it does not provide an explanation to why all humans are mortal. If you believe that you need an explanation, explanatory power, justification, explanation, cause. These three concepts are necessary to reason. But if we talk about explanation specifically, if you need that reason, it needs to have explanation. Because I agree, explanation is a heavy component, but it's not necessary. Because if you agree that it needs explanation, then you are basically saying that early scientists couldn't reason. Children cannot reason because they cannot explain, which is not the case. So, I would say it's not a necessary component. For example, I could say that I'm not smoking because evidence says that it's harmful, without providing an explanation, because I know that evidence says that smoking is harmful, but I don't know the explanation to why that is. But still, my decision is rational, isn't it? To not smoke, because it follows the evidence. So this is what I'm saying, Yeah, not every belief that we hold, has actual evidence behind it. But in terms of this, super, this extraordinary claims, they require extraordinary evidence. They require undeniable evidence because they are strong claims, They cannot just be accepted like that, even probabilistically. For example, most people, they believe that their parents are their biological parents, without making any DNA tests, So that's just, that's an example of belief, without sufficient like evidence, but in most cases it's likely, you know, especially where I'm born. Most people have their biological parents. We don't have them that much divorce rate, you know, so most people like have their biological parents. Their parents are their biological parents, so it makes sense to believe. And the belief is not certain, it's probabilistic, so it's probabilistic with a high percentage, it's above 50%, so in the case of religion, it's slow. Yeah, I mean, there is a chance it's true, but it's slow. Yeah, I think, in my opinion, you know, in my opinion specifically, I think it's slow. Anyways, I think I gotta explain some terms. What I mean by rationality, I already explained. It's about decisions and, you know, this is my definition. It's about decisions and beliefs. Something that follows evidence. Whereas logic is the study of valid reasoning. Something, in order for something to be logical, it has to be valid. As with my example, my example is both valid and sound. But I could just give like an example, like an argument that is valid but not sound, but it's still logical because like the conclusion follows the premises. So this is what is logic about, the conclusion following the premises. If I say, for example, all humans are birds, birds are mortal, therefore humans are mortal. The first premise is not true, right? But still, like the conclusion is logical because it follows from the premises. So this is what I gotta like understand, the difference between validity and soundness. Validity is whether the conclusion follows the premises, whereas the soundness is about the premises themselves. Are they true or not? So anyways, what I'm gonna say is the problem with religion is that a lot of its claims, as I say, heaven, the existence of heaven, hell, afterlife, existence of God. I mean, all these claims are infalsifiable. They cannot be proven and they cannot be disproven. So that's the problem. A lot of its claims, that's why religion is so hard to disprove. Because it relies on this unfalsifiability. That's the reason why it's still standing to this day. If there was, for example, one interpretation of every verse, you know, of the Bible, of the Quran, there was only one interpretation, you know. Of the Hadith, there was only like, as well, you know, like all the Hadith are accepted, for example. Then it won't be that much of a problem. The problem is that, like there is this, what can I say? I don't know if the right word to say, but the only accept, what I would say, confirmation bias, would that be like the right word? I was thinking of something else, but yeah, they tend to accept like evidences like that support their, you know, their beliefs, but to reject those that oppose their beliefs, then they ignore them. They also tend to interpret, like a lot of these religious people, you know, Christians, Muslims, like they tend to interpret the text according to their own, like according to match science, to match, you know, to match logic, to match science, in a way, you know, so they makes it infalsifiable. So there is no way. How can you disprove? Like, is there any way? The question to be asked is there any way to disprove religion? Would there be a case that if it's true, you know, the case is true, then religion is false? I don't think there is, because no matter how you approach religion, there is always like a defense. There is always like this infalsifiability, this multiple interpretations regarding this like ambiguous verses, you know, the problematic verses. So you can't really like, for example, like if you say that the Quran says that the earth is flat, right? Someone would come to you and say that this is wrong interpretation. The right interpretation is that how you see it. You know, the Quran talks about how you see it, not the way it is. So you can't really falsify this. You know, if we talk about the hadith, anything that is not logical or doesn't match the Quran, okay, anything that doesn't match the Quran is false, because the Quran is in higher degree. You know, the priority is for the Quran. That makes sense, because, you know, it was written at the time of the Prophet, even though at that time, like, the Arabic alphabets were missing 15 like alphabets, right? The Arabic was missing 15 alphabets, you know. Alright, we'll take it. We'll say that the Quran has been preserved, right? But what about the Hadith? Hadith was written 200 years after or so the Prophet. So there is less like, so it's less reliable, right? So they say, like, you compare between the hadith and the Quran, see if the hadith mentions the Quran, that's how you accept it. But about the hadith, I mean, if it opposes the Quran, then you reject it. But what about the hadith that talks about things that aren't in the Quran? For example, when the hadith that says that the Prophet said that if you like eat dates in the morning, it will protect you from venom. We know this is logical and unscientific, right? And there is nothing in the Quran that says something that the Quran doesn't talk about this. So it's like particular to hadith, right? But you would reject it, saying that it's illogical, and like everything that the Prophet says is our liberation from God. Therefore, it has to be logical, 100% true. And this is not logical. This is not unscientific. Therefore, you reject it, which again makes the hadith unfalsifiable, makes the Islam unfalsifiable from the hadith. So what's the solution here? You see how it relies on unfalsifiability. I mean, not also Islam, but also Christianity. This is the problem, You cannot falsify something that relies on unfalsifiability. We gotta agree, on interpretation. You gotta, 50,000 interpretation books for Islam. They don't agree about the meaning of the the meaning of the verses, right? How can you follow this? Also, I mean, I don't know much about Christianity, right? But how can you follow like a book that with an ambiguous meaning? You don't know the meaning of most of the verses. How can you follow such a book? I really don't get it. Also, like, the amount of people who follow our religion doesn't indicate that it's true. The number of people who follow something is not an indicator of its truth. It's an appeal to popularity. Because something is popular doesn't mean it's true, right? Truth is different. It's about the validity, right? Whether the info, like what is presented, is actually like logical. Whether it's scientific, right? Even though science, is not fixed. It changes. It fixes a lot of its. There is this thing called paradigm shift between a new theory, in which a new theory emerges and like undermines another theory, right? So science is evolving. It's dynamic. So, but at least that's the closest thing we can get to truth, right? At the moment. In a lot of things, it's like science is like an approximation to truth, even though it doesn't provide the absolute truth. If that makes sense. Anyway, so that's what I'm gonna say, man. There are also other things, that raise a red flag. For example, saying that infants who die, they will go automatically to heaven. Whereas and people who never heard of the message, of Christianity or Islam, they would go to heaven as well. That makes non-participation safer than participation. Because if you participate, if you live in an Islamic or a Christian, country, if you've been exposed to the religion and you didn't follow it, then you would go to hell. So there is a chance that you will go to hell. Whereas if you have never been exposed to it, you die young, then you would go to heaven. That raises a question. Why don't you just sorry to say that, but end the life of infants when they're born? So you give them a free end directly, in a way that doesn't make you the murderer, right? Maybe just abandon them or something, right? So they could die and go to heaven. There will be a free ticket to heaven. This is like where the problem is. And people who have never heard of Islam, I could just for example, I could just to tell people to go to a country in which there is no where there are no major religions, where the theism is so low. I can just tell people to go and live there. For example, in China, to live there, to have families there. Maybe you would say that they have a responsibility to spread what they know. Because if they know about the message, then they are responsible for spreading it, right? But it would be safer for these people who live in this countries where they are not exposed to religion to stay living in these countries, because they would go to like heaven with 100% certainty, if that makes sense. So I would say, like, in a sense, like your religious system, right? It's like it rewards non-participation more than participation. So this is the problem. It shouldn't be the case. And is it my fault if I'm not convinced by the religion, by the evidence presented? I think they are not convincing. Is that my fault? If it's a limitation on my cognitive abilities, even if it's the truth, I don't recognize that it's the truth. Is that my fault? It's not really my fault. So how can you punish me for something like that? And how can you punish someone for eternity about something that he did? That is limited, like for a limited number of sins, because no matter how many sins you make, it's limited. Like something finite can never equal to infinity. And why you gotta have this bad ending when some people go to hell for eternity and some people go to heaven for eternity? Why not punish the people? Why not bring justice and punish those who deserve it, right? Then send them straight to heaven. Why not? Why this bad ending? I don't get it. Like, it seems more like a movie to me, more like an anime ending to me. Why you gotta have this bad ending? And the concept of obeying a god, and if you don't obey him, you get punished, seems like more like a way to threaten people, to spread fear, right? Because I think this is human, the concept of obedience. If you don't obey me, I will punish you. I think this is more like human. Humans want to be obeyed. I don't think the same thing can be projected onto God, but this is personally what I think. God doesn't need your obedience. You might say, no, he created because he tells you to worship him because you are the one who needs it. It's like us inventing robots and telling robots that we don't need y'all. Y'all need us. I don't think this makes much sense. If you don't need something, why create it in the first place, right? Why make everyone go through this, right? You might say, because I disagree with the idea of this, because I think the entire idea of this is the test capabilities, right? If you already know that all the students in the class will get 20 out of 20, yeah, right? Score, no matter what. Then what's the point of the test? It's like the test becomes meaningless. You might say that it's still like an argument on you on the day of judgment, that you did these things so you deserve punishment, and you, right? But why make humans go through this all this in the first place? Why make everyone obedient just like the angels? Why not do this? Why not send everyone to heaven? And make everyone live a good, enjoy, enjoy life, enjoy heaven. Just send them to heaven, make them strike them from free will, make them obedient all the time, just like the angels, and send them to heaven. Why you gotta make angels, obedient all the time, whereas humans, give humans free will so they can obey or not obey? Why this? Why not just give everyone the obedience, strive them from free will, and just send everyone to heaven? Why you gotta create all these differences in humans, This free will, the religions claim, even though I don't really agree with free will, right? Why make this, make them go through all these pain, the potential for disbelief? Why all of this? If God is really benevolent, I think he's gonna avoid all of this. So what's the argument behind this? What's the reason behind this? What's the counter argument? Anyways, so you get my idea, right? These are some of the reasons why I think religion is not I don't know. I don't personally think. I think it's human made, right? I'm not convinced by it, because it never existed since the beginning of humans. If it were really like from God, then it should have existed since the beginning. Not until later on, you know? So this is what I think. You might say that, well, like Adam is the first human, so the message was there was always a message to worship God since the beginning. But still, that there is no evidence for that, right? Because some people might say that Adam is the first like Homo sapien, not the first human. There is a difference, right? It's like the first conscious human consciousness in the way we know it, not the actual first human. I mean, there are disagreements about this, right? And there is the lack of evidence. We can't really know, so if he's the first human or not. If the idea that he is the first human like contradicts evolution or not, because some might say it contradicts evolution, because evolution says we came from apes, right? Whereas like religions, Christianity, let's say we came from Adam and Eve. But some would say that it doesn't contradict evolution. Adam or Eve, like they're first Homo sapiens, they're the first human that are conscious in the way we understand consciousness, not the actual first humans. I mean, there are disagreements about this. We can never know. So I think the best, most rational thing to do is to withhold belief, saying I don't know. This is not it is a knowledge claim, but it's not a certain knowledge claim, right? So it's probabilistic, and it's also about epistemic state, not about the knowledge itself. It's not because if you say that I know that I don't know means you know, and it's like saying I know that I'm blind, therefore I can see, which doesn't make sense, right? It's about the epistemic. It's a second order like claim. It's about your state. It doesn't need evidence. It's about your epistemic state, not about the knowledge itself. And you can be certain about your epistemic state because it doesn't require evidence. It's not something about the external. You're not making a claim about the external world. It's about yourself. So, anyways, I hope y'all get the message. So this is the point I'm trying to make. I'm discussing the whole point is to discuss is atheism rational, and I give the reason why I withhold judgment in my case. You know. Atheism, agnosticism to be specific. I mean, a lot of people, they look at them as the same. They define atheism as believing God, agnosticism as believing God. I don't know. They see the way atheism is defined academically is not how they see it. Most philosophers think of it as God doesn't it's the belief that God doesn't exist. But most people in Euro space, they disagree with this idea. They when they say the atheists, they mean agnostics. Anyways, I hope y'all get the message. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'm out.